Attention all F1 fans, welcome to F1 Max. The world of Formula 1 is always full of surprises, and today we've got an absolute bombshell for you. Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko has made some extraordinary claims about Aston Martin's surprising performance this season, and it's got everyone talking. So buckle up and join us at F1 Max as we delve deep into the latest controversy that's been sending shockwaves through the paddock. Trust us, you won't want to miss a second of this. The big story of the first few weeks of the 2023 Formula 1 season has been the Aston Martin's AMR23. Over the winter, the Silverstone team have become one of the fastest on the grid, and it's already powered Fernando Alonso to a podium in Bahrain. Aston Martin looked fast in testing, as well as showing impressive pace on the long runs. It seemed like Aston Martin could actually take a real step forward in 2023, but we had to wait and see as to whether the team were for real. I think we can safely say that Aston Martin are for real. While they did benefit from Charles Leclerc's retirement, the Aston Martin car still overtook Carlos Sainz as well as being comfortably quicker than the Mercedes. Aston Martin being quicker than Mercedes was a big surprise when you consider Marko the Silverstone team's engine supplier. Lawrence Stroll's team have started the season in brilliant form, upsetting a few people along the way. Helmut Marko is one of those people who seem most outspoken about the AMR23. The Bahrain Grand Prix saw Red Bull take the top two spots, with Fernando Alonso taking his Aston Martin to third at the checkered flag. Helmut Marko was asked about the impact of a man who has been very important in the design of the AMR23, Dan Fallows. Marko said, "It's true that what Fallows had in his head cannot be erased." He added, "Copying the Focus is not prohibited, but can you copy in such detail without having documentation of our car? We had 3 Red Bulls on the podium, only the last one with a different engine." Marko added, "If you compare the cars, the Aston Martin is most similar to our Red Bull. There's a reason for that. Not only did Fallows chance, but also some other employees, and they obviously have a good memory." Wow, there is a lot to unpack there. For one thing, in that statement, Helmut Marko has made some big claims about Aston Martin and their car. He's saying that Aston Martin have copied the Red Bull car from last season. As there were no major regulation changes, Aston Martin are able to run a very similar car this year to Red Bull's last year. He was also pointing out a major part of Aston Martin's car development this season. Dan Fallows is a name you might hear a bit more about if Aston Martin continue to excel this season. Dan Fallows might not be a name that many Formula 1 fans are familiar with, but he has actually been a crucial part of a dynasty in this sport. Fallows joined F1 in 2002 when he became the senior aerodynamicist for the Jaguar team. He moved to Dallara before returning to Jaguar when they became Red Bull Racing. He became the team's leader of their aerodynamics department. Fallows was crucial in producing the 4 Red Bull cars that Sebastian Vettel would take to the driver's title 4 years in a row. Red Bull might not have won 4 consecutive constructors' titles if it wasn't for Dan Fallows. Fallows continued to work with Red Bull throughout the hybrid era until it was announced that he would be moving to Aston Martin starting in April 2022. It means that 2023 is the first full season where Dan Fallows will be having a major impact on the design for the Aston Martin car. And it certainly seems like he has had quite the impact. It makes Helmut Marko's comments look even more interesting now. He is implying that Fallows might have used some of the designs he had created and seen during his Red Bull days to make the Aston Martin even faster. I mean, you can't deny that the Aston Martin is faster this year than it was last year. Helmut Marko is not the only Red Bull official to comment about the similarities between the Aston Martin and the Red Bull of 2022. Christian Horner has had his say on the matter, talking about Aston Martin's rise to success. He said, "I think it demonstrates to all the teams that it is possible." Horner added, "So they've obviously done a good job over the winter. They say imitation is the biggest form of flattery. It's good to see the old car going so well." When the Red Bull boss was asked about Aston Martin further, he said, "And I think that it's flattering to see the resemblance of that car to ours, so it was great to see the 3 of them on the podium." Christian Horner does love a jab or two, and so it's hardly surprising to hear him poke fun at the similarities between the Aston Martin this year and the Red Bull that dominated Formula 1 all of last season. There are certainly similarities between this Aston Martin car and last year's Red Bull. I mean, why would you not try to copy the fastest car on the grid in the following season? We've seen this team do it before, including the pink Mercedes the Racing Point created in 2020, before they became Aston Martin. So why would they not have done it again this year, especially with a former Red Bull engineer? Considering the impact Dan Fallows has already had on the Aston Martin team, you might think that Red Bull are regretting letting him go. But when you look at the situation as a whole, it seems like the move has worked for both parties. Dan Fallows had gone as far as he possibly could with Red Bull. He was the head of the aerodynamics department at Red Bull. The issue for Fallows was that Chief Technical Officer Adrian Newey and Pierre Wash, who is the team's technical director, were not going anywhere. It meant Fallows could not progress to take on a bigger role with Red Bull. So when Aston Martin made the move for Fallows, it only made sense for him to accept the offer. Moving to a different team appears to have given Fallows a bigger role in designing the car, partly thanks to him being able to bring a lot of knowledge from his time with the Milton Keynes-based team. It also does not appear that in the short term, losing Fallows has cost Red Bull any pace. They're still the fastest car on the grid, and it does not appear that the reigning champions have suddenly had a load of aerodynamic issues. It is reported that Red Bull also received a handsome fee for Fallows. It definitely seems like Fallows leaving worked out well for both teams. Considering he will have played a large role in the design of the 2022 Red Bull car, which is incredibly similar to this year's car, he probably would have enjoyed seeing the podium full of cars he helped design in Bahrain. Red Bull made some pretty big claims when they said that Aston Martin may have copied some of Red Bull's designs. Copying the designs of another team is not allowed in Formula 1 unless you have a relationship with that team, where the component is a listed part of the car. One of the main similarities between the two cars is the side pods. Aston Martin's side pods have appeared to be very similar to Red Bull, but that's hardly surprising. Red Bull had an excellent aerodynamic package last season, and Aston Martin are not the only team to have taken inspiration from the title-winning RB18. So you might think that the comments Red Bull have made about the similarities between the Aston Martin car and their own would have gone to the FIA to investigate any possible copying. But it appears that Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko has tried to take back his comments. When Helmut Marko was asked about whether they had any evidence to support the copying claims, Marko said, "No, not at all." And that's not meant to be an accusation either. Those are just joking remarks. If you look in the field, the Aston Martin is the car most similar to the Red Bull. It is clear that Red Bull are not planning to launch any formal complaints about the similarities between the Red Bull and Aston Martin cars. And they don't have sufficient evidence. Any claim would be pointless, as Red Bull can't prove that any of the designs have been stolen or reused. Red Bull still have the fastest car on the grid, and it doesn't look like Aston Martin will quite be able to catch up to them, at least in the short term. But maybe if Aston Martin do get even faster, then we could see Red Bull start to think about launching a formal complaint. Even Red Bull's drivers have noticed the similarities between the rest of the grid and Red Bull's car. Max Verstappen was asked about the 2023 grid being closer than the previous year, with Max saying, "It's not really a surprise. If you look at most of the cars, they all copied each other, so everyone is getting smarter over the years anyway with the same regulations." The reigning champion added, "And if you see that one car, particularly, is doing quite well over a year, you'll try to copy some things, and that's why naturally everyone is getting closer, and in general understanding the car a bit better. Maybe teams copying each other could be a good thing." So, is it just a coincidence? Or has Aston Martin really copied Red Bull's F1 car? F1 Max invites you to decide. Put your thoughts in the comments below. While you're down there, why not hit the like button and subscribe? Thank you for watching F1 Max, and we'll see you next time.